Start out sharing my, see how we do with. Should be, are we there, Brian?
Yep, you're good.
So I'm going to start out today here in the Apple Teacher Learning Center, just because it's a great launch pad for lots and lots of parts Apple has available to us. So today we're going to be focusing on Swift playgrounds and coding for kids, which really offers them a lot of skill set that here Apple has some fabulous resources and can Apple ID, and you need to use the one with your and you can create a password here to get in with your Apple ID and have all of these resources. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things here when we get started today, and then we're going to hop into the coding piece. But I've seen a lot of information out on Twitter and some of my other social network pieces about these 30 kids. A calendar of 30 different activities that use the apps that are available on the iPad. And a lot of them aren't necessarily like iPad focused, but maybe out in the yard and doing something and then taking a picture of it or building it into a journal. There's just a lot of really neat activities. And as we head here to the end of the school year and some of our students are kind of saying they're kind of getting done, some of these activities get them start and keep them interested and engaged for the end might be really, really helpful. Also here, own a lot of people that are their Apple EDU specialists are also offering tips and tricks for working online with students and keeping kids engaged. And I think that can be really helpful. And you can actually earn badges for the different the tasks that are here. And like our team, we have made ourselves Apple certified educators or Apple teachers by activities and making sure you understand the ins and outs of the apps on the iPad and on the MacBook. And that is something that's always here for you for your own learning. And you can do any piece or any app that you choose, or you could do a large number of them and be certified in iPad or certified on your MacBook. Our team has done a lot of work around this. Everyone can create. Really lends into the idea of students having activities that they can really create and show their learning and what they're doing. And it works with music and video and has different integrations right into every content area available to you. The books are absolutely fabulous, and the supports that are available to you here can really, really help you engage your students in doing some creation rather than just consumption of the technology. I'm going to slide down here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about Swift Playgrounds and what that app offers for our students and the content that's here and available for you in the Apple Teacher area or from Apple in their resources. So I'm going to just in the teaching overview. A little bit about why I think it's really important as we start to think our and that action of coding. It really gives them the language of technology. It gets them thinking creatively. It's superb for building problem-solving skills and really making them think about what it is that they're doing and building and the steps and pieces that go with it, but also about the fact that there's not always one solution for everything. And sometimes somebody may have found a better process or a better way to do what they were doing. And inside the programming here, it will often tell them, well, yeah, you did that, but you did it in 8 steps, and it can really be done in 5. and challenges them to see if they can take out some of the steps or figure out how to be a better programmer to be able to do that with the pieces that they're doing. The coding also is really fun and engaging. And I think it really helps build to our future skill levels. It prepares kids for classes that they're going to have in higher grades. Here you're seeing the screen. Let me try again. Everyone can code activity in playgrounds, but it actually jumps right up, goes into true Swift programming, which would be app development that many of our high schoolers are also using and working in as they get going. So the building blocks here and are really, really simple for our elementary students, middle school students, or high school students to start to learn and build from. But it goes into true Swift coding, which is used in many of the apps that are being designed today. So we're building that long range skill for our students as they're going. This year, I started a coding club at Lowell Elementary, and I worked with a team of 4th and 5th grade students who volunteered to come at their lunchtime and work with me on coding. Actually started in Blockley because we were working with Dash and Dot Robots and working on the Wonder Challenge, that is an international competition that students have to problem solve and do the coding for and record and journal, and then share that out and hopefully be one of the winners of the contest in the end. And we had a small team and we started a little bit late, but it was amazing to me to watch these students and their troubleshooting as they work through things, and the problem solving and the teamwork and collaboration that went on. And the fact that they came every week at lunchtime and were willing to work and do this because it was so engaging. When we did the shift here to virtual, and now I don't have a robot for everybody to have at home, we jumped into playgrounds. And I will be very honest and tell you, I didn't launch it as a teacher. I didn't launch it well. I just said, hey, we can learn and continue our coding growth by going into playgrounds, and you guys can work through it. And if you have questions, we'll get together virtually one day a week and chat through it and see what people have learned. And those students really dug in and they stuck with me for quite a while. Our group's dropped off a little now, which I know is happening across the board, but they're still out there and they're still programming and they're still learning. And many of them kind of went like, okay, I don't need to do the steps. And I jumped into a harder playground and a different activity and suddenly went, oh, but I don't know how to do that. There's big functions in it that I don't understand, and hopped right back into playgrounds and learned how to do it themselves so that they could continue. So it really is something that students can take off on and work at their own pace and do what they're able to do. And there are super supports in here from Apple as you work through the different pieces. So we'll kind of dig into some of that as we go in here. So this is available to information. They have coding activities for clubs. But you can see there's quite a few pieces that have been built that build up that piece of the coding and continue all through the different levels and are available to the actual information for the curriculum guide. Everyone can code. I put this resource for you. New puzzles that are is coming out soon, all built on the same programming, and students can work their way right through all those different activities and keep going. Teaching with apps. They also have a curriculum pathway that shows you what that would look like and how it builds on to level. Today. Is an overview of the curriculum that actually breaks it down. This is actually my favorite screenshot of the whole thing, and I've pulled it out in another ways because it's the app. This is available in here, understanding of what those that are in the app. But it's laid out for you. So if you're a teacher and you're trying to, it's easy to be able to get your keyboard and makes it really fun. A timeline and what the different breakouts of each activities are within play code, so you know what it is that you will be in those areas, and just have an idea what it is that the students are working. Materials are built for both teachers and students support to go through that, and I will show you that in with a lot of other pieces and parts that can go with it. So it's not just about coding, and it's not just about working through playgrounds, but it's having them think about the learning. It's having them reflect. It has them tie it into their real world pieces. And so those parts are all kind of in there and embedded in that coding application and activity. And in the different pieces, it really does tie it into the different things that you might area. So here in the material for the playground is the app that kind of launches this all in their code world. The demo pieces are here for you. It has a demo for you, but it also talks about where does this go. This same programming, the kinds of things that we use for other peripherals that we connect to other coding devices. If we had started here in our playgrounds, my coding club would have been way further ahead when we were working back in Blockley with Dash and Dot and trying to do our challenges for the Wonder competition, just because they would have had that skill set already built. It's very, very simple. It's very easy to get support right in the device. It's not expecting teachers to be super and understand all of it. It has different puzzles and concepts to work through. Gives you the and those are just those pieces that help you understand why you might want to be interested in playgrounds. So I am going to shrink this window for a moment into the coding guide. So this is the teacher's guide that's available in iBooks and is there for you as a resource. We're thinking about launching. It gives you an introduction. It talks about the various pieces of Swift, why you bring it into your classroom. And so I'm going to not go over all of that again here, but know reasons for why coding in the classroom, both in making our students stronger thinkers and language, which can be really, really key. In the activities for the actual coding curriculum, they're divided into actual lessons for a teacher to use. And each of those lessons are broken up into 4 different parts. They will all have the same structure. In the Learn, it's going to be something that connects it to everyday life. It's not necessarily coded. In the very first one on commands, it's asking them to think about what they do when they take out the trash. What kinds of commands would they need to give somebody to be able to do that? And they actually have an activity you can use if you were face-to-face with your students, where you could kind of go through those things before they ever get on the iPad and start coding. In the second section, they're doing the try. And the try is actually getting them into the playgrounds and having them do some coding and see where they fight and what are the commands that are needed and thinking about the order of those commands. Then there's the apply section, and the apply section always uses info for them to create something. It might be a journal, it might be a video, it might be some directions or explanations, but it's always asking them to apply that coding concept that they have just used. Sometimes it's in a playground, but most often it's completely out of that app and just asking them to really reflect and build. So this really helps build that strength of the learning along the way. That final piece, every section, is going to be the connect. And the connect asks them to think about how that relates to their real life. They need to create something to demo their learning, and it asks them to show those steps and the stages that they just went through. So it's a really well put together lesson or unit, if you look at it that way, that lets the students progress through those different parts, not just the coding that I'm doing, but how does that really take effect in what we're doing. So here it goes in even deeper and talks about what those 4 parts. It gives you how much it takes to do these pieces and parts. What I found is students work through it faster than I would have expected to with the coding part. But when we came to some of that work and reflection piece, that might have taken them just a little bit longer. Happen here in some of the different sections. It talks about the tools you're using and what you're going to see, that come from this, and the elements that are in there. If you look at some of these skills, they are truly 21st century skills that we would love to have our students be really adept at using and being able to work in classrooms. There's huge accessibility accommodations with Apple. They have done a fabulous job providing voiceover pieces to it. So if you have somebody who cannot read it, they can hear it. If you have somebody who can't hear it, there are tactile puzzles that they can do using Braille. There's also a sign language interpreting piece for many of the lessons. So that's a really great accessibility piece in meeting the needs of all. When you get started, we're recommending you start here in the Learn to Code area, and there's 2 sections of that. Then there are all sorts of challenges. Honest, once we get started in the Learn to Code, down into the challenges right away. They wanted to be doing the really cool stuff. Battleship was a biggie that they all went out and learned how to do right away. That are all involved in this. So there's a great wealth of information and content to you with that. It also uses many of the available to your students in self-service, and these are used in the lessons that ask them to reflect on their learning or to try something as an activity that's doing that, building the connection. There's information about clubs and how you might implement that in clubs that are really in the teacher's guide. It starts out and it gives you the full guide. So this is actually the start to this guide. This is where they would begin if they were using the iBook to work through this. It tells right away what the vocabulary is that they're doing. It gives them a launch. So have you thought about directions on how to do a jumping jack or a math problem? And that's really what the coding is. It's about the instructors and what commands you might use. Again, it ties in that first learning section, something that happens. What might this application, a student activity that you do with your classroom, or they could do with a friend, to kind of think about that coding piece and giving. And then they actually get in and do the coding. Shows what the activities are that come in this lesson or activity. They actually get to try, excuse me, and with Playgrounds app and do the coding, but it's really great in that it asks them here in the book to do some different things. Now my crew popped right into Swift Playgrounds and we just started right there and doing the activities. And we came back afterwards and said, let's do some recording of it. Let's talk about where we got stuck. Let's talk about what we figured out. And we started doing some of this, capturing the learning along the way to help us grow as thinkers and problem solvers. So again, you see we're in the student pages. This is what theirs looks like. It gives them all of these same activities. It explains all of the same pieces of the app for them. And then get into the next part, the next piece to it. They get to the apply, where they actually have a fun activity completely out of the Playground app, but doing something to use that same coding skill. In this case, they're making MeBot do a dance. And what a fun way to share, compare the different dances or see what the kids did for their designing. How did the code work? What was easy? What wasn't? And do some reflective and that. And then there's a connect back to real life piece where they're around them and seeing where that coding happens. All of the lessons are structured this way with those 4 parts. And again, this is the student guide. So now we go into the teacher's part. And the teacher's part is laid out exactly like the student is, but it gives you the skill set for things you might want to do in the classroom or in your virtual classroom to help talk about those different activities and how to integrate them. Really get the teacher piece of looking at that and what might be some of the things that the students need along the way. So this is just a fabulous resource in helping you get started with using it with students. The student guide is a fabulous way for kids to hop in and really dig in deep and think about it. And both of those are available readily for everybody, and you can use them within your classroom. So I am going to hop in here. And let's actually take a look at Swift Playgrounds. So I have downloaded the app from self-service and put it on both my iPad and my Mac. It's available on both, but I'm going to run it from my iPad right now because that's where I've done most of my coding. Working with the students, I'm playing right along with them. Some of them are further in the coding than I am right now. I've got to play catch up, but they've done a really nice job. So when you come in, there's an introduction, and it starts out completely not thinking about coding, but giving you those real world pieces again. And it talks about some of those things with directions and what you might need. And gives them the introduction to the coding. And fun, animated, easy to be able to work through. It's not heavy duty on text. And then they get to actually click in the start coding page. So to actually do coding in the app, it's very simple in that it's giving them the directions over here of what it is that they're looking to do. I'll be honest, students figure this out very quickly and don't do a whole lot of direction reading. But when they click here, I'll do it on my iPad. When they click here on the actual planner page where I'm writing my code, I get a coding keyboard pops up down here below. And any codes that I have available for me to use will show up down here on the quick control board. And I don't have any of them right now. There we go. Let me hit my return. So I'm using 2 commands. I have the ability to collect a gem or move forward. If I want to collect a gem, I simply tap it and it puts it into my coding stream. So I don't have to do a lot of typing. It's there and readily available to me. I can do my basic editing and say, nope, I'm going to back out of that because that's not really what I wanted there. I can go to a new line. If I do need to type something, I can press the keyboard arrow and I get my whole keyboard will show up for me. I have my quick functions over here where I can redo something or undo something. The idea is once I've put my coding in there, I can say run my code, and Byte is actually going to do what I asked him to do. And if I'm successful, yay, I had the coding right. It tells me I've done that, and I can simply go on to the very next page. And I have my next activity, my next directions. Just looking at the screen, students figure out pretty quickly some of the major things that they're going to have to be trying to do and figure out. Some of the other pieces here that are really helpful. I have a little button down here that lets me look at my coding, and I can say, just run it fast. I think I fixed what I've got wrong. I want you just to run it fast. Or maybe I want to go a little faster than it is because this one step at a time is killing me. Students love to do that until I tell them, yeah, something's not working right. And then they have to go back through and do it slowly and see where did I err in my code. And if you notice on the left-hand side, it's actually telling me what step it's on. So when I do that, I can see, oh, I said move forward 2 times in a row and I really only needed it once. It lets them troubleshoot and kind of problem solve through that coding. I'm going to head here into my next page. Now you see things get more complicated. At this point, I've now added another code to my piece. So I have the ability to do not only my collect gem, but move forward, but I can toggle my switch and I can turn. So as we move through these, different commands are added and different parts come with that. I do want to point out over here that I can slide my screen, so I can do it in full view. I also have the ability to turn it, so I can make it face the exact same way I am as I'm thinking about my coding. I can enlarge it. So now when I run my code, I can see, oh, that's where I had it wrong, or that's where I was missing a step, and be really, really thinking about each and every one of those parts that goes in there. So while I had it on the small window to begin with, once we start running code, we do most of it in here. And then I simply slide my window back and I can see my code to go back and fix anything that I need. Up here at the very top of your screen, you see 3 little dots. There's support there for students. There's the ability to get help in playgrounds. It does a really fabulous job of explaining pieces to them. There's other documentation about what I'm in here. There's a glossary of the terms. If I'm not sure what gem means, I can go find out. It also lets them take a picture of their work, create a PDF of their work. They could record a movie of Byte actually running through the steps and the pieces of code that they ran, or they have the ability to broadcast live. I haven't played with that one yet, so I don't know what that is yet. They can also share with somebody their coding that they've done, or they can simply reset the page and say, I'm wiping it out and I'm starting all over again. But quick and easy ways for them to work with some of those pieces. I also have here at the very top the ability to, so I came back to the beginning today and started out with some of my smaller code further through this, so I can pace through it. I can also hit that down arrow and see exactly what those different parts and pieces are. So in the commands unit, like we saw in the teachers module, these are the steps that they need to do before they come back then to that apply and connect step. It's not here in the app. That's part of what you would do as a teacher who's helping them with coding or having them work through the Everyone Can Create Code student manual and say, hey, those are the parts and pieces that you would do after doing the commands pieces. Here, they could simply just work through the coding and simply do coding and nothing else. But you can see that there are multiple steps and stages in this to build different pieces and grow that coding experience. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. I know that was an awful lot, and I hate doing 30 minutes before I ask you, but are there questions or things you would like to see inside the app or in the teacher's manuals?
One of the questions that is sitting right now in Maria, you asked about accessibility. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know in the guide you talked about that there was accessibility features like reading the text and stuff like that. I was just wondering how you would access that within the app or set that up.
So in here, if you have your iPad set up for those features, like the read alouds, and the coding is all built to be able to do that. The sign language pieces and the touch coding are actually outside of the app itself in a separate playground.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And let me just show that quickly on the iPad because I did not do that here when we started. And it's not going to let me launch this. So when I come into my actual app, I have my different pieces that I have here for learning my code. And these are 2 of the playgrounds that we've been working with my grouping. But there are a lot more playgrounds here that I can click see all and see multiple activities. If you see, there are all sorts of different challenges that are available to your students, and they don't have to get all the way through the learning to try some of these. But if you look here and say, okay, here's a beginner one, that might be one that they can do after doing the first few parts just to add something different. So it's not just working through the coding skills, but it's actually an activity or a challenge that they're trying to do. And those playgrounds are there and available. There are also some other ways to get going with more of the Swift coding available. So it's a huge resource with lots and lots of different activities and things that are available to students right within the confines of the app itself. Any other questions?
You said you've been working with it with 4th and 5th grade. Is that kind of where you'd start with this? Do you think that's?
I had the coding club was 4th and 5th grade. We have actually done some of the learn to code pieces here with 2nd grade on up. With the younger students, I think you could do it as a team or as a group activity with even younger kids, but because of the reading, it wouldn't be independent. But some of those other coding things that are out there, like a Tinker or the Google Code, can certainly be used with even younger kids. And I love the idea of using offline activities just to build those skills.
And Apple has a curriculum alignment chart that's out there, and they talk about really 3rd through 5th grade alignment of curriculum, and then 6th through 8th. So 3rd is kind of their official stance on it, but absolutely younger will work, just the reading challenge.
In that original teacher guide, the ties are the 3rd and up.
Wendy, I know that you've done a little bit of work with code.org too. Would you suggest using the two in conjunction, or if you were using one, would you only use code.org and not playgrounds, or playgrounds versus code, or could you kind of be working with them both?
You could absolutely be working with them both.
Okay.
One of the things I found with the students is once they found they had learned something, then they wanted to go apply it in all sorts of different areas. And all of a sudden they'd get to something and they would be more stuck. And it was like, okay, come on back to the basics. When they got into functions right away, it was like, yeah, I don't know how to do this. And bringing them back really did help.
Perfect.
Just the question that came through, but just to clarify for the recording, it is already available in self-service for students. So that's not a challenge you're going to run into.
I want to pull back up here. Just one quick piece to add in here that I want to show. Let's start at the beginning. Is the Hawthorne team, Vanguard team, wanted to get some coding activities going for their building, and they created the slide resource for their teachers just as a part of an activity week, getting out and getting kids doing something different and really creating with the coding. And so we introduced Swift Playground and let them know that that was there and available in self-service to use on the iPads. But they also shared a couple of favorites. So one of the primary activities that they asked all of the primary classes to do was to take a look at bunny coding in Google. And this was part of their Google Doodle for 50 years of coding, and it's not extremely new in any way, shape, or form, but you see kind of the same skill set at play as what we were doing in the other activity. And it was something that they could do whole class or have students work on, and very simply drag and drop. I'm looking at those carrots and thinking, I'm going to go one and see if I got it. Oh, yep, I don't have it yet. And when I'm successful, it brings up the next activity for me to be able to do. And it kind of does that same thing, very quickly taking it through, trying some different parts and pieces of that same activity. And then they had a shortener to get them there. These were some of the favorite coding activities of the Vanguard team thinking about primary. So using the Ozobots, using Scratch Junior, code.org, absolutely fabulous resource, way to level, get kids in at their level, lots of resources available. And Tinker is another one. little bit more upper primary, but there's lots of pieces that can be used with primary students. In the intermediate activity, they did the same kind of idea and thinking about that coding and what they wanted them to do. And then they gave some favorites to get them started in thinking about that. And then again, their recommendations on some of the places to get kids in and get them coding. And so they shared some of those ideas, and then the code.org and Google CS to get the students started in just thinking about how could you launch some coding. And they were able to do that over the course of the first week, and many of the kids just kept digging in and going from there. Any other questions or thoughts?
Only other thing that I wanted to add is, so if we get kids interested in specifically the Swift coding early on, all of our Mobile Maker app development courses that are 9-12 are built upon Swift. And so those curriculum guides you saw earlier are right in alignment with what happens when they get to high school. So they'll have offerings. We have really 4 semesters of offerings in Mobile Makers and app development. And what you'll see kids make in that is quite incredible, to give kids the avenue to get into that and up started early through the use of Swift Playgrounds is such an advantage for them.
Yeah, I think that whole idea that this curriculum just follows through and it builds upon everything that they're doing. Most of the app development that's being done for the iPad is done in Swift. So, it opens great doors for them, even in employment beyond that. But that whole idea of the fact that the curriculum and pieces are there is really, really impressive. Any other questions? I think the nice thing with the coding is that fact that if we can get them started, if we can give them a taste, those kids who love it or like it can just go on and work on their own pace. They don't need us as the supporters. We had one of my students is beyond me in where I have been in the playground so far. And he said, I got really stuck, and our whole team was on in the virtual session, and we just walked through it, troubleshot it, looked at what the support was from the actual app itself, and went, we figured it out. We've debugged the code for you. This is where the step is wrong. If you fix that piece. And he was able to go on. And it's just sometimes taking that step back. I don't have to know all the coding, but being able to look at it logically and step through things can make a big difference.
Hey, Wendy, I think that you just said something that was really valuable. I think a lot of times, sometimes teachers hesitate to incorporate the coding in their classroom, specifically because they don't feel like they know enough about it to allow their kids to start going. And I think like that's one of the things as teachers we have to get comfortable with, knowing that our kids may know more than us, and that's okay. But what we have to do as teachers is we have to create that space for them to start learning and start applying. So as a teacher, I don't have to be the expert. I have to create the space in my classroom or create that excitement or that engagement in my classroom and let the kids go, versus knowing it all first before I'm willing to let kids start dabbling and trying. And I think that's like so important, so that teachers can say, you know what, I don't have to be the expert, and that's okay, because just like you did, I can let these kids work together and they will figure it out and build those teamwork skills and those computation skills.
Absolutely. And, usually there's somebody in the group who is willing to plug through it. And even a student who hasn't gotten there yet can often look at it and troubleshoot from a whole different lens because they haven't been so focused on that particular task yet. When we did the Make Wonder Challenge at school, I really stepped back. I did not give advice. I did not tell them what they needed to do. They had to read the directions. They had to figure out what the plot was. When they get done, they thought they were done. And I'd say, are you ready to record? Because they had to record each of the steps. They'd say, yep. And I said, double check your directions. That was probably my biggest instruction, double check. And they'd all of a sudden go like, oh, wait a minute, he's supposed to go under the bridge, not over the bridge, or he's supposed to what? And they'd have to rebuild and rework it. But I did not give coding advice. I just provided a space and the supplies for them to be able to do it. And they really worked through all of the challenges on their own to do that. Melena, I saw you asked about Coding Club. I was working with them from home when we went virtual. We had to switch our days because it was in the middle of their normal instruction time with their virtual classroom. And I had probably, I'm going to say we started out with 10 of the dozen kids, maybe 12 of 15 who joined us and came virtually for the first couple of weeks. And then it became fewer. And then it was like Fridays aren't working for us. So we switched days. And then it just became like, we're just going to work on this on our own. We'd rather do that right now than come together as a large group. But we did have a student who got stuck, and we pulled in we have a team space for our coding club. And we put in there, hey, we're going to get together, do a virtual meeting. We need to help this person crash some of their code and figure out what's going on. We need some debugging help. And I think we had 6, 7 kids in there all looking at his code and trying to figure out where it wasn't working, even though they weren't at that same point. And we were able to, as a group, figure and get them rolling to the next section. So we did stay and work on it virtually for a while. And any other questions?
Just gonna talk. There's so few of us. I think it's great that they were decoding each other's stuff. That shows a higher level, I think.
Absolutely. Fun in the fact that like they were really willing to help out somebody else to move forward past where they were too. You know, it was like his success is good for all of us.
Yeah, I just think, that computational thinking is so, so important. And I think like we don't offer that time and space, even if it's not necessarily, we don't call it coding. We don't necessarily offer the space for that to happen. I'm a firm believer, like when we talk about the 4 C's all the time, I think that as we continue to progress, there's a 5th C, and it's that computational thinking and really teaching that skill so that as they continue through the education system and then into the workforce, they have built up that strategy and that persistence and that ability to look at something and debug and work through different scenarios. Like it's not that skill, although we talk about it in terms of coding and that way, but that skill is so valuable and transferable to so many different areas. And so I think it's so important that we get these experiences out there for our kiddos.
Sounds like every PLC meeting a teacher has ever had. Let's look at it. Let's figure out what we need to do. We tried it. Did it work? Did it not? What do we need to do differently? It's used as a business skill, a life skill over and over again. And I think this does it in a way that's really safe for kids to experiment. It's not about being right away. It's not about cruising through the levels. It's about experimenting and learning.
Thank you for Wendy. I loved you walking through it. I haven't dug into the Swift Playground as much as I have with code.org, and